Welcome to the More Life Podcast, where creatives, problem solvers, and entrepreneurs talk about squeezing more out and finding meaning in this crazy thing we call life. Let's dive in. Talk to us a little bit about design systems and how they can help you execute the stuff that you have inside the brands.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was originally thinking or talking about design systems in the sense that that's what you do for UX UI projects. You have essentially just a library of things. Um, so are you asking sort of like how that can work for more branding stuff, or how does a brand work within a UX
For
UI?
for
Yeah,
branding or UX UI, because like for us, we have a style guide for our brand for creative partner, but then we eventually created a design system where it makes it so much easier to have the colors palette set up in a live work file, and our fonts, and the way we do our buttons, and the way that we do all of our headings. All that stuff is saved inside of XD, not in Figma. But it makes it so much better. Like, we want to update our Facebook banners. Well, we already have a system that kind of holds that all together.
sure. Yeah, I'd say they're crucial. And from a UX perspective, it's like, I used to actually design UX pages in Illustrator, and that was a nightmare because I didn't use libraries and stuff. I'm old school. That's the thing too. Until Figma, I was kind of like you with design with Illustrator. Something they'd come out with some new feature, and I'd be like, I don't know how to use that. I'm gonna do what I know and use the pen tool or something. I would never like embrace the new things until I got to Figma. Where I'm just like, oh, that makes sense. Let's just, why am I not learning this new thing? Uh, so I would design things. I would design pages like literally this pixels on the screen. And if I had to go change anything, it was just such a pain in the butt just to go in there and move things around and all that. So design systems give you flexibility, and they're just extremely helpful for making changes and stuff. And so you sort of have like, one source of truth where all your branding assets are together, your colors, fonts, everything. And if I were to go and change any of those, it's universally changing throughout all of my website pages, which I have like 100 pages going at the moment in Figma. And so, well, maybe not the, probably instances of pages, probably about 100, yeah.
But
So
when
you
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 say
know,
100 pages, is that 100 different projects or a website of 100
a
pages?
website of 100 pages. It's maybe a
Okay.
little bit less than that, but there's quite a bit in there. But
And
if I wanted to
are you doing
go,
like beta stuff in there as well? Like, we're testing stuff out. We got some test pages here. We're working on things there.
yeah, exactly. And so it's always kind of evolving and changing. If I come up with something new on a page, I might put it into the design library and like graduate it to be a universal component. And so if I have like the same header banner on all my pages and I want to make a change to it, I can do that in the design system. And so it affects all the pages I have previously. So it's good from a practical standpoint, but it's also just like keeping you, on track with your brand, making sure you're using all the same colors and fonts. You choose from a list versus invent some new thing every single time.
Yeah, and it helps the slippery slope. Sometimes what happens is you make unconscious decisions, and it's like, yeah, we used this lighter version of the green and it worked really well, and then it's never recorded anywhere, nobody else can find it, and it keeps everything kind of in sync where you're kind of like slipping away from what you said you wanted to design, and this keeps it like locked and loaded until you're ready to make, like you said, graduate it and like make a change and say, hey, we're actually going to adjust, how we're going to do these buttons, or what the hover animation is going to be like, what all that stuff is going to be. In UX and UI, I feel like more and more that's becoming even more important. Like, if it doesn't feel good, the experience isn't good, then you lose people right away. And we live in this world of like lots of flash and like gizmos, like even what's that one called, Webflow, super cool. I'm always concerned, like, will this work properly? Is if I give this, website build to X, Y, and Z, are they going to be able to figure it out beyond all the cool animations and all of that type of stuff, all the Swift 3 and all that kind of stuff that happens? Just having things that work is so helpful, and I find like user experience has grounded me as a designer, where you kind of have to think of like, how is this actually going to play out versus how nice and how cool it all looks, because we can get caught up in how cool things can look too. I remember when I first told my mom that I wanted to go to school for graphic design, and she's like, "What is that?" And my family is from Haiti, and we spoke French at home, and I didn't
Okay.
have the vocabulary to like explain it. I'm just like, I don't know, like you design a sign like on a building, and she's like, "Can you get a job with that?" And I'm like, "Yes." She's like, "Are you sure?" She's like, "I've never seen you draw anything before." I'm like, "I don't have to draw anything. There's something called Photoshop." And she was not impressed at all. Again, as a child of an immigrant, engineer, doctor, lawyer, those are the top three. The arts, not so much, unless you're going to be like the best. Okay, like
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
were
yeah,
you
yeah.
were like a savant, pianist or cellist or something like that. And I was not that either. I let my mom down in that position as well because I took piano lessons for 13 years. But that's for my therapy session next week. We're gonna solve that eventually one day. But yeah, like trying to explain to somebody who knows me personally how I'm a designer. She's like, "Well, you didn't draw anything growing up. Like, I never seen you like sketching things." But I think I lean more towards the problem solving, creativity, where
Yeah.
I still have a very linear brain, and it's almost like a Rubik's cube. And if you do it just the right way, you get the colors to align, and the idea to come across, and the message to be clear. And I feel like both those things are almost necessary. Like if one's not better than the other, you need to have the more artistic stuff because there are some things that there's only so many geometric shapes which is my style. I love geometric
Yeah.
shapes. There's only so many geometric shapes you can use for, let's say, somebody who wants to sell hand soaps. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
wow, that's interesting. It's supposed to be very feminine and delicate, and here I am with my rhombus and ovals and squares. It's not gonna give the same vibe that people are looking for, but I'm trying to broaden our horizon. And it's very unique. I think I even spoke about this for those of you who are listening on the podcast now. I did a takeover for the Ottawa Design Club. In fact, it's still going on right now, even though it's 7:30 p.m. I already snapped a picture. You're going to be on your own channel later on tonight.
I would say creative block is one of my biggest challenges. And it stresses me out that I'm stressed out about it. Like I can go weeks having creative block and just be like being super depressed about it. And then like one day something will hit me and like I just keep running with that idea until like the creative block hits me again. But I would say that is like my biggest struggle because I'm such like a perfectionist that like I always have to have things on schedule and
Right.
whatnot. So yeah, that's
That's
my
hard.
biggest thing.
Yeah. No, I get that, especially when like people have an expectation now, right? Like you now have people who are like, "Oh, I can't wait to see what she does next," and you don't want to disappoint people. You don't want to disappoint yourself as
Yes,
well, right? Like
exactly.
you have most people forget, who are not like designers or creative. No matter how hard anyone else is, we're harder on ourselves, on like how we want to be perceived, how our work is received publicly, which takes a big toll. And yeah, there's times where you gotta maybe take a break and kind of. My thing is go for a walk. Like don't think about the work, and then somehow I will think of a creative way to finish the design or a creative way to solve the problem. But when you're like so in it all the time, every day, it's almost as if it's too close for you to read. It has to be a little bit further away for it to make sense. Um, Sam, how have you managed in the year of like COVID, and that's when your business kind of started? Um, so was that like a blessing in disguise where there was extra time, or was it like really hard to be at home? Or you like an outdoor person where you always wanted to be outside and you couldn't really be outside?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, there's a personality in every typeface too, and like it's kind of hard to almost fully like, so I'll explain certain things to my clients. Like, I'm like, this is why I chose, this typeface. This is why this is lowercase or uppercase. But sometimes it's hard to fully even articulate like just that feeling you get when you look at a
100%.
typeface. At least for me.
Yeah, it's very unique. It's one of those like niche sectors of design. It's like, people that make icons and people that make typefaces and these different glyph packs that go with the fonts, and how it can be very expressive and very tonal in its own way, and how you approach it. And then you can then imagine it in a whole different light and, contrast it with whatever else inside of a brand that can be its own unique type of thing. And before we wrap it up, I'd love to hear your take for people who are starting out, who are just new to the whole design world and being your own boss and all that kind of stuff. What advice could you give to young aspiring designers who are looking to, like, I don't know, just make it in any capacity or any like understanding of the word make it, whether it's like make $1,000 a month or make $10,000 a month? What does it look like?
Yeah, and I always give this advice, and I'll say it again, but I think my biggest piece of advice as far as like designers go is that the way you design and the way you create things is uniquely yours, and you were given that God-given ability. And so, like, all that to say, like, don't compare yourself to someone else's work, because the way you create and the way you make things is exactly the way God had intended, and that's the realm you should go in and try. And as long as you're passionate about it, go in creating that way. Because I mean, there's some designers who love to illustrate. There's some designers who love like photo manipulation and Photoshop, that kind of thing. Like, whatever you're passionate about, go towards that route so that you're going to be ultimately be happy in what you do. And then also, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, like, it's also okay to say no. Like, and I know that's hard when you're first starting out, because like you need to get jobs and you need to work and everything. So obviously there has to be a balance. You can't always say no, but if someone's asking you to do something that you're just going to be dreading for 3 months working on it, just kind of weigh, is it worth like your mental state to work on that, and
Right.
If it's worth it as far as monetarily. And also one thing, and I do the same thing, like I still struggle with this, is make sure you're charging what you think you're worth and what's worth it to you, I guess, because I mean, I still struggle with that. Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do it for whatever. And then afterwards I'm like kicking myself because I'm like, dang, that took a lot longer than I actually thought. So I don't know. So yeah, I mean, just don't compare yourself to others and just be confident in the way that you create, because that's the way that you should be creating.
Now we're going to talk a little bit more about, I guess, where your heart and your mind have to come together. There are some people who are innately more business driven. I think you're more artist driven. You're more on the artist side, that you have to do the stuff for business because that's how you do your art. Would you agree, or do you think that I'm a business person who has used art to the look on your face already?
I'm definitely not.
You're not.
You're
an artist.
Like, I also don't feel like an artist either. I
Really?
feel like I'm yes.
Let's talk about
feel like
that.
I don't feel like I'm very artisty. I just feel like a creative engineer, to be honest.
Okay.
Like, I'm
okay.
very practical in my approach to things. Like, I never sit down and like meditate and like listen to music and like get inspired. Like, I like that's how I imagine an artist is like.
I know that feeling.
Not. Like,
I know that feeling.
I'm like, okay, I have 2 weeks to get this done. Like, what's the easiest way to go? Like, how can I make the most out of my time and have the biggest and boldest and best result? And how can I, like, I'm just like, like a creative engineer, I will describe myself.
I say this all the time.
Not artist either. None of them.
I say this all the time, that I'm a creative problem solver. I just solve a problem, and we use design for that, like, graphic design, branding, even marketing. But yeah, I understand there's kind of like an in between space, especially now with the word creator in terms of online and YouTube and people that make videos and stuff like that, where you're not a filmmaker, you're not a producer, right? Like you're not just technical business. Same thing with like art. You're not. I'm not a full on artist where I don't draw. I can't draw. I can. I can't draw. I'm just gonna leave it there. But I can't. So how did this start? Were you artistic as a young person, or were you just a creative of later in life?
Art and creativity was something that I took to at a very, very young age. I was also blessed to have two parents that are also very creative. My dad's a phenomenal illustrator, my mom's a great painter.
Wow.
So I got very, very lucky in that sense, and it was a really great outlet when I didn't know what else I wanted to do.
Right. Okay. And this is something that you were lucky enough to see presented before you. My daughter sometimes believes that I'm like an actual artist. Um, and I'm like, kind of, maybe I want you to do greater than what I'm doing. She's a real artist. Like, I was not like her as a child, where she sees something once and she'll just practice drawing it over and over and over again. And I never had that itch the same way. But there's definitely something that you can tell from an early age, where somebody is like, they're drawn to this. This is a way of expression for them, and it helps them sometimes alleviate anxiety, or it helps them process emotions. It helps them feel at ease. And creativity is such a cool thing. I think we were created to be that way, to kind of find a way that works with us, to express ourselves. Some people that's, visual arts. Some people it's going to be like music and listening to the kind of music that really inspires you, or making music, playing instruments, all that different type of stuff. So for you, as you're growing up and you're finding your passions, what are some of your early influences as you're learning the craft of artistry, of being an artist and drawing and painting?
A lot of the early influences actually came from, this is going to sound so cheesy, but my dad's sketchbook. My dad grew up in, it was kind of like a boarding-ish school, and he got to do all these cool art lessons, and he had this sketchbook, and there was one sketch of in it, and it was the devil. And I remember, like, as a child, I was like horrified. I was
Yeah,
like, you
as
don't,
one would be.
that's not a
Yeah.
thing. And I remember being like, no, that was cool though, because it was very nice, attractive piece of art with a strange subject. So that kind of immediately set me off on a tangent of, okay, let's make weird things. And it was awesome, and it was a really, yeah, I feel bad for people who kind of had to struggle or fight for their creative purpose, where I kind of got handed mine or passed down mine almost. But it's something I'm very thankful for, and it's cool getting to utilize it in different
That's
ways.
so true. A lot of people don't know where to go, where maybe they are creative, they like to work with their hands, or maybe they see things in their minds and they don't know what the next step is. And there is a very kind of luxury of being, oh wow, this is the logical next step for me. Like, clearly I have two prime examples here who are going to be able to help me hone in this craft. And it probably also helped your personal relationship with your parents, because you had this very strong, deeply rooted thing that existed in all three of you, where you can kind of be like, okay, we connect at a certain base frequency already, because we all have this one thing, where we're all completely in sync with. But for a lot of people who are coming up, I feel like I've met some people like this, not often, who are kind of like, I know you're creative, but you just don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And I don't know, how do you help someone like that? Like, have you encountered that?
Yeah, and I've done it even myself too, where um, touching on the neurodivergence a bit, because of my ADHD, I tend to jump from one thing to another, or I get bored of something quickly. So I'm sitting there with all this creative energy and, my tried and truths aren't working, it's not going the way I want it to, or it doesn't feel the way I want it to. And I will just try something else. And that was somebody said, just create. And I said, okay. So that's how I wound up doing jewelry for a brief stint.
Love it.
Just like trying out different mediums to create. And I think that's true even in the professional and corporate worlds, trying it, just trying
Yeah.
something. And then if it doesn't work, at least you have a jumping off point. Say, okay, I didn't like this, but I did like this, so let's go that way.
There's one thing to have a great style, but what do you do with that? What do you say with that style? Having a good style is maybe having a language, but you have to choose which words you want to say or what you want to speak to. And I think you choose really cool and unique things to speak to. It's especially on your Instagram bio page where you see some of the art that you're working with. It's meaningful. It has, I guess, that poetry, storytelling, writing aspect that you say that you practice, that you love so much and as a passion. It really comes through in the artwork because you can tell that this is not just a picture that was produced by somebody who has a very special skill. It's something that is almost like a vignette. It's a one frame of a story, and it leads you to believe that there's more to the story that could be shared, but you've selected one portion of it to share with us, and then you maybe sometimes add some descriptors. Even the more recent one that you posted of Pascal Siakam, and it's almost like a frames by frame showing different aspects of his quote unquote game, but also the journey it takes to get to where he is now, and you can see an evolution between the words and also where those words are placed on his body or on the frame of the art piece. So I kind of all ties it all together. Storytelling is one of those things where either you understand it or you don't understand it, and I'd love to hear how you come through that process of like finding something that means something to you, converting it into a still piece that can still speak volumes.
Wow, like I can tell, like, you told me that you enjoy art, and I can tell that you have a creative eye too. Like, the fact that you notice all that, like, that's you're so detail oriented. So yeah, I appreciate you kind of like translating that into words for me, because like it's hard for me
Right.
to kind of express what I'm trying to do, and you actually nailed that. So thank you so much for that. I'm gonna refer to this podcast if people ask me
Right,
like,
right,
why
right,
I
right, right.
randomly put like
You know that
words
it feels good in your mind,
like the
but
posts
you
and
don't
stuff.
necessarily
Yeah,
know what words, like
but
why I did that. I can't explain it all the way, but this is what makes
yeah,
sense to me. I get that too.
yeah, and yeah, like it's hard to express why like I how tell a story, or why I pick like a certain story with things, but it all begins with I honestly like like the Ode to Basketball series that you saw, all those different illustrations of different basketball players that I personally like handpicked, and I felt was like not only resonates with like my story, but may resonate with other people. It all begins with, it comes out of a place of like fun and love, and I honestly do these illustrations, not like I'm not purposely trying to like create contact to kind of create something, but I do it because I genuinely enjoy basketball, and I genuinely enjoy art, and I've always seen like
Hmm.
an art form in athleticism, most especially in basketball, just the movements and the athleticism. So when I did like a work like the Pascal Siakam one, or even like the Vince Carter like piece that I did, I wanted to, like, I don't like just posting something and then just kind of like leaving it out there. I want to have like people resonate with it, because I think that is one of the greatest things that an artist could experience, is not only having the opportunity and privilege to share their artwork, but to have the privilege of having people resonate with it and tell you how they resonate with it and what it makes you feel. And that's like just like kind of how I feel about like my work. I enjoy like connecting with people. So whenever I post like a new illustration, especially something that is personal, that is not a project that I was commissioned to do, I try to tie like a story to it. So I kind of look into, I've always known like Pascal Siakam's like, backstory. And I, even with like Vince Carter and things like that, I try to tie like maybe like a personal story into that hopefully some people can resonate, and that I think that most people might resonate. So for instance, the like Vince Carter piece, I tied it to like a personal story of my dad, who's a Filipino immigrant. And when he first came here to Canada, one of the first things he bought was like this small, like this baby sized purple Raptors hat. And like he would always like point to me and my brother of like Vince Carter, and just we would always watch like games together, and there was just like a lot of happy and like warm memories associated with that. And I wanted to kind of tell a story that is my own story, but a story that maybe people can feel good and kind of feel warm when they read it and be like, like I can resonate with that. Or even if you don't resonate with that, you can kind of like feel the love and kind of feel like the happy memories associated with that story. And then they can tie it with why I chose this particular like basketball player and why I portrayed the illustration the way I did. And not just leave it out there just for interpretation. I kind of want to
that's really powerful. Like I don't know, I feel like
and they will struggle with that. So I always loved art and drew since I can remember, but I didn't want to pursue it to the point that I enrolled in biology to go to college.
Oh wow.
And
very different.
Yeah, very different. But the trend there was artists are very curious, and I was very curious. I still am very curious, and biology and how things work fascinates me. But I couldn't deal with calculus and chemistry, so I ended up moving to graphic design because it was the closest. Excuse me, the closest I could get to drawing in a career that was more in demand, I will say, or more marketable, I guess. Everybody needs a logo, right? That's what I thought at that point. I enrolled in graphic design and didn't really like it either, but I graduated from it anyway. And when I was working in an ad agency, and this was one of the reasons why I didn't like it, I didn't like the vibe and the environment of ad agencies.
Yes, it's very different.
Yeah, it's hardcore. And the senior graphic designer there told me that he saw in my portfolio more of an illustrator, and I was like, what's an illustrator? My conception in Costa Rica, there was painting and there was graphic design, and there was not another career that had to do with drawing, except maybe animation, but I wasn't into animation. So I didn't know illustration was a sort of more middle point between something that is more commercial and something that is more artistic. So that just stuck in my head. And then after that, I stumbled a little bit, and I wanted to do a master's degree, but I knew I had to get out of the country because I needed a change of environment. I needed to make connections. If everything stays the same, nothing changes. So I found out about a university in Savannah. They actually came to like an art festival in Costa Rica, and I met them there. And I was like, oh, this is a university for creative careers. This is awesome. So I applied there to do a master's in illustration. Finally, this is something that I want to do. And in the program, I found out about this technique called scratchboard, which is very detailed, very involved. It's like small lines. Think about etching and like ink drawing sort of involved in one media. It took me days to create an illustration, and I wanted to be an editorial illustrator. And I graduated and actually started getting some traction. I got hired by the Boston Globe, and I got hired by another publisher, and I was getting some traction there, and I loved it. I still love the medium. And then I was going on a rabbit hole and find out about graphic recording. And the thing at that point was, it kind of, I like I have this metaphor that I use when I'm talking to students, which is you have to find your gold, and the way that you find it is you have to go out with your metal detector and find out what makes you tit tit tit, beep beep. And there was a beep 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 to me when I saw graphic recording. It was just curiosity,
It
pure
was calling out to
curiosity.
you.
Exactly, exactly. And the thing at that time was multiple. The company, this person that was posting these things was working for a company that was in Atlanta. I was living 2 hours north from Atlanta, and we were already thinking, my wife and I were expecting a baby. We were already thinking about moving closer to downtown to make more connections and be around more creative folks. And this came out like a particularly good time, and I still hesitated about applying because, in graphic recording, you have a talk that is 1 hour, and in 1 hour, you have to do multiple drawings and have it finished. And I spent days doing an illustration. So I didn't know if I could pull it off, but something in me said, man, you got to try. And I think you can make it, have that inside voice that sometimes it's thinks too much of myself and pushes me to do things that I don't think I could be possibly doing. So I started practicing and like more purposely, because I've always sketched while I listen to talks and stuff like that. But I more purposely through that style. I studied the style and I tried the branding considerations they had and created my portfolio. And I was like, yeah, I think I could try it, and I got accepted. And the company is called the Sketch Effect. I still work with them. They're fantastic folks, and they trained me since 2018, 19, and I've been doing that professionally since then.